Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. This is Juliet from Jules Closet. Thank you all for tuning in. And on today's episode, I'll be showing you how I made this Bubu dress having a front ashoke pattern with center slits and side pockets. Please do well to watch to the end of this video because you'll have so much to learn. And if you've not subscribed, what are you waiting for? Please hit on that subscribe button right now and turn on your post notification to get notified anytime I drop a new video. Thank you. For this Bubu dress, I'll be making use of a damask fabric, then my ashoke piece for that front pattern that we have. The damask fabric that I'm using is 3 yards and the ashoke piece is quarter of a full pack of ashoke. Then I'll also be adding lining piece to this fabric because it's not as thick as I wanted. And I want this dress to turn out thick and firm. I placed the fabric on fold 2 times so that I'll be having 4 pieces all together to cut out my pattern. So after folding the whole fabric twice, I have 4 pieces already. So on that part that doesn't have any opening, that has the fold and no opening at all, I'll start taking my measurements. The first measurement I went in was to get my starting point. That will serve as my shoulder line. So I took my shoulder measurement, which is 15 inches, and when divided by 2 is 7.5. I went ahead to mark out 7.5. Then from that shoulder line, I'll just go ahead to take my other measurements. The first one is my bust point at 10 inches. I marked it out. Then I marked out my waistline, which is at 16 inches. And from the waistline, I went down by 9 inches to get my hip line. So I'll be extending these lines from the other end. So I just placed my tape across at the other end and marked out the different lines respectively and extended it. From the shoulder line, I'll be taking my full length measurements, and the full length we're working with is 58 inches. That is how long I want it to be, and this fabric was about 59 inches. So now I'll be having 1 inch as my folding allowance. To work on my neckline, I'll be making use of 4 inches as the neck width, and for the back piece, the neck depth will be 1.5 inches. Because this fabric is still on fold, I'll be marking out the neckline for both the front and the back, then I'll separate it later to cut them out. And for my front piece, the neck depth I'll be using is 8 inches. Then I'll go ahead to connect these points together. So the front piece will be having a V neckline, while the back piece will have a round neckline. From the points that I marked out as my shoulder measurements, I'm going to be taking the length of my sleeve. So I went in with everything I had remaining on the fabric, which was about 18 inches. Then I marked it out. From that point, I came down with 1 inch and I'll be connecting it back to the neckline to form my shoulder slope. On the bust line, I'll be taking my bust measurement, which is 36 inches, and when divided by 4 is 9 inches. So I marked out 9 inches and added 5 inches allowance. So your allowance can be smaller or bigger than this 5 inches, depending on how big you want your Bubu dress to turn out. On the waistline, I marked out my waist measurement, but I didn't use my exact waist measurement because I didn't want it to be too curvy. So I went with 32 inches instead of 30 inches. And I added my 5 inches allowance. On the hip line, I marked out my hip measurement divided by 4 and also added 5 inches allowance. From my shoulder slope, at the point that we have the full length of our sleeve, I came down by 13 inches. This 13 inches will serve as how wide I want my sleeves to be. Then I'll just mark it up to that point where I had my bust measurement plus 5 inches allowance. I went ahead to connect my shoulder slope to the new line that we have with a straight line to form the width of our sleeve. So from this new bust line that I have, I'll be connecting it down to the waistline, then to the hip line, and down to the full length of this dress, just like I'm doing so. At this point of the armhole, I wouldn't want it to be sharp and pointy as it is, so I just went ahead to cover out that part of the armhole. So from this line of my sleeve, I went in by 1 inch. This 1 inch will serve to form a slope for my sleeve so that it will give it a better look. So with that, we are done drawing out this pattern, and I'll be adding 1/2 inch allowance to the shoulder slope. Then to the neckline, I'll also add 1/2 inch allowance around the round neckline. After then, I'll go ahead and cut this pattern out. And remember to include the allowances that we have when cutting out. After cutting this out, I went ahead to give the neckline a notch just to know the middle part of this neckline. Then I'll just go ahead to separate the front piece from the back piece so that I could be able to work on the neckline of the front piece. Next thing I did was to arrange my front piece properly, and I'll be measuring out the part that I want to replace with the ashoke fabric. From this point of our v-neck, I'll be going in by 2 inches. This will serve as the width of replacement with our ashoke. So from that point down to the full length of our dress, I'll be going in by 2 inches. So from this point of the v-neck, I'll be connecting it up to my neck width to form my new neckline. So I'll just go ahead and cut this out on the new line that we have throughout the length of the dress. This is the ashoke fabric I'll be using for the center front of this dress, and I'll just go ahead and iron pepper stay to it. You know, the ashoke, it's somehow light and it has a way of opening up when it's not thickened, so you have to thicken it with the pepper stay. I've gone ahead to cut out lining pieces for both the front and the back of this dress. The next thing I'll do is to align the brocade fabric and the lining together, then go down to my sewing machine and stitch it down at the neck and the shoulder so that it will just stay in place. So you're going to do this for the 2 sides and also do the same thing for the front piece. So for the front piece, I'll be doing this by sewing down the shoulders of each of the front piece, then the middle portion you're also going to sew it down on the sewing machine. When I was done with that, I aligned both the front piece and the back piece together, facing right sides to right sides. Then went ahead to stitch down the shoulder with 1/2 inch. Here I was done working on the shoulders. I've joined them together. So the next thing I'll be doing is to work on my sleeves. So for these sleeves, we'll be closing it up with a bias made from the fabric. For this bias that we'll be needing, I went ahead to cut it on fold, and the width that we need is 1.5 inches. That's 1.5 inches is what we'll be needing. Then the next thing I'll do is to go ahead and mark this out and measure out the length I'll be needing. So you're going to place your tape on one side of the sleeve and take it through to the other end and measure out how long of the bias that you'll be needing. So mine was about 25 inches, and I went out to measure it and marked it where it stopped, also adding a little allowance just in case. After that, I went ahead to cut this out, and remember we have this on fold, so I'll be cutting it into 2 to get the 2 pieces I need for my 2 sleeves. So you know, the major thing that we're using this bias for is to close up the sleeve ends and also to create a channel for our elastic, since this sleeve will be having an elastic to form like a balloon sleeve. So I placed this bias on the fabric by facing the right side to the right side of the main fabric, and I'll just go ahead to sew it down on the machine with 1/2 inch. This is what it should look like after sewing it down. So you go ahead and open this up, then flip it over to the wrong side of this dress, fold it in with 1/2 inch and go down to your sewing machine and sew this down. This is what I had after I was done with the whole process. So with that, you've created a channel for your elastic, and you can see how the finishing of this sleeve looks like. To attach my center piece, I'm going to be taking measurements from the middle of the back neck. Then from there, I'll place my tape and take it down through the front to the full length of this dress, just to get how much fabric of the ashoke I'll be needing to replace my center front. So when you do that, you're going to times this measurement by 2 to equate the other side. The length I got was 63, so I'm going to be cutting this 63 out on fold since we're doing it for the 2 sides of the center front. After I've ironed the pepper stay to my ashoke to make it firmer and thicker, I'm going to be placing it on fold. Then I'll measure out 63, which was the length that I got. I'll also be adding sewing allowance to this length, so I added about extra 2 inches for my sewing allowance. From the top part of this piece where we have the fold, I'll be measuring out my neck measurement. So this measurement can be gotten by placing your tape around your neck to the point where you want your V-neck to stop. Mine was around 28 inches, and when divided by 2 is 14 inches. So I marked out 14 inches. Then for my full length, I'll be marking out how long I want the slit to be. So I made use of 20 inches for the length of my slit. So the next thing I'll be doing now is to place this fabric on fold, just like I'm doing, to get a center line where I'll be sewing to close up the parts that I wouldn't be needing to be open. So just like I'm doing, you place this on fold and make a mark. Also, you can go ahead to iron it down so that you get a center line. So as you can see, I've ironed this out and the center line is very much visible. So the next thing you'll be doing is to make a stitch from the point where you had your 14 inches for your neckline to the point of your slit. After sewing down that part, I'm going to be turning this fabric to the right side, just like I'm doing. So you're going to pinch up the two parts upwards and the two parts downwards and separate it to the right side, just like I'm doing. So just follow the steps that I took to turn this out to the right side. After turning this out, I give it a good press so that the whole sides will relax and stay together. I also flip this again to the wrong side to give the neck a notch, just to know where the center part of my neck starts. At this point, you can also fit the neckline and your slits just to make sure that it's of the desired length, and you can go ahead to make changes before installing on your main fabric. So for this area of the neck, from the point of my v-neck, I'm going to be taking out a small part of it just so that the neck part will balance very well on my main fabric, and also at the collar point, the point that will be behind your neck, so that it doesn't discomfort you because of how high it's going to be. So I'm just going to mark out a little bit, like half or quarter inches around those areas, just like I'm doing, and cut it off. So when I was done with that, I'm just going to find the center back of this collar and give it a notch to know the middle part. To attach this our ashoke fabric to the main fabric, we're going to mark out the middle part of the neck of the main fabric and also the middle part of the collar of the ashoke fabric. So as we've marked it, we're going to just arrange the two pieces together, then start aligning it with each other. You're going to hold the neck down with the right side of the fabric facing the right side of the ashoke fabric, then pin this down, then start sewing. You go to your sewing machine, you're going to sew one side first, then after then you'll do the other side. So just follow the line, turn it to the side that you're sewing, and sew this down on your sewing machine till you reach the full length of this fabric. After which, you're going to hold it from that point again and start to sew the other end, turn it over, then sew it down with 1/2 inch to the end of the fabric. This is what it looks like when I was done attaching this fabric to my main fabric. So you can see it's seated well, and you can see our neck opening and our slits opening already formed. I flipped the dress to the wrong side so that I'll be working on my full length. So remember, we had 1 inch allowance for our sewing allowance, so I'm going to use 1 inch and fold the end of my dress just like I'm showing you. So before I go down to sew this on my sewing machine, I'll just be folding in that allowance and using it to measure out the much that I need on my ashoke. So I'm going to cut out my ashoke, just leaving 1 inch allowance, which I'm going to use to fold it, because we don't want to fold it together with the main fabric. So I'm just going to fold it, turn it to the wrong side, and sew it down with 1 inch, just like I'm showing you. Then afterwards, I'm going to flip it to the right side and attach it to my main fabric. So I'll be doing the same thing for the other side of the slit, and I'll also go ahead and fold in the other parts with my 1 inch allowance. For the back, I'll be folding it in with 1 inch, so I'll just hold this down and go over to my machine and sew it up. So this is what it looks like when I was done working on the down part of my dress. So as you can see, I held it down before attaching my ashoke fabric to my main sleeve. So you can see how it turned out, and you can see where I used 1/2 inch to attach it back to it. And also you can see that the foldings of the ashoke was not seen because I did it inward. So the next thing I'm going to do is to attach pockets to this dress before closing it up. So this pocket is totally optional, as the Bubu dress will still turn out fine without pockets. So with the remaining fabric that I had, I placed it on fold 2 times because I'll be cutting out the 2 pockets together. The width of the pocket I'll be using is 7 inches and the length will be 10 inches. So I went ahead to mark these points out. So looking at this fabric, one end is closed up and the other end still has opening. So from the end that has an opening, I'm just going to form my pocket curve just like I'm doing. Then I'll go ahead to cut this out. Opening this up, I have 2 pieces of fabric for my pocket, so I'll just go ahead and attach it to the sides of my dress. To mark out the point of attachment of this pocket, you'll be placing your tape from the shoulder down to 18 or 17 inches mark. So depending on your body size, but I used 18 inches to get the point that I needed. From the 18 inches point, we'll be measuring the width opening of our pocket. So I made use of 7 inches. This is how wide I want the opening of the pocket to be. To attach the pocket, I'll be placing it on fold and I'll be having the right side of the fabric inwards. Remember, the sides of this dress is still open and we're having our main fabric and our lining piece. So I'm just going to hold the main fabric and the lining piece together, then attach one side of this pocket to that opening that we've marked out. So I just go ahead and hold this down with an office pin, then go to my sewing machine and sew it with 1/2 inch. On the other parts of this fabric, I'll go ahead and do the same thing as we've done on the first part. So I marked out the opening of my pocket, then went ahead and pinned down the first part with my office pin so that it can be in place and I'll be able to hold down the other part too. After pinning down the first part of the pocket, I aligned the second part of the pocket with the other side of my dress and pinned it down to just at the place I marked out the opening. So after pinning down, I'll head to my sewing machine and sew down this part with 1/2 inch. At this point, I was done joining the pockets and I did the same for my second pocket on the other side of the dress. So the next thing I'll be doing is to close up the sides of this dress. So to close this up, I held the sleeves together and I'll be sewing it down with 1 inch from the sleeves down to where my pocket started. At the pocket area, I'll be sewing it down with 1/2 inch. Then on the under of my pocket, I'll sew it with 1/2 inch also. Then at the outer part of this dress, to finish it, I'll be sewing it with 1 inch till I reach the end of the fabric. After sewing one side of this dress with the pocket and closing up the sides, this is what it should look like. You can see the attachment of the pockets and the closure of our sleeves down to the full length of this dress. So in case you didn't get it at first, you can just watch the directions that I'm showing to see how to close yours up perfectly. As you do this, do not sew in front of the pocket so that you don't close up the space. At the beginning of this sleeve, I left it open so that I can attach my elastic to the elastic channel that we created already. So for the length of the elastic, I used my sleeve round measurement minus 1 inch to cut out the length of elastic that I need. And at one end of this elastic, I'll be attaching my safety pin. So this safety pin, I'll use it to drive in the elastic through the channel that we have on the sleeve till it comes out at the other parts of the channel. Once the elastic comes out at the other end of the channel, I'll just go ahead and hold it in place and sew it down on the sewing machine. I formed belt for my Bubu dress to attach on the inside of the dress just to make it fitted if I need to switch up the style. This is totally optional. To attach this belt, turn your dress to the wrong side, then measure out from the shoulder. You measure out your waist length plus extra 1 inches. So mine was 16 inches and I added 1 inches to make it 17. So I marked it out on both sides of this dress. On this waistline that I have, I marked out my waist measurements, and my waist measurement is 30 inches, but since it's on fold, I marked out 15 inches. At this point that I have marked out, I'll be placing my belt on it, pin it down, and go over to the machine and sew this down. To sew this down, you're going to be lifting it up from the inside to avoid sewing the fabrics together. So just lift it up as I'm doing and go down to the sewing machine and sew it without sewing it on top of the other parts of the dress. And with that, I'm done with this Bubu dress, and it turned out very beautiful. I also attached buttons, cloth buttons to this dress. I hope you found this tutorial helpful and valuable. Please don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe to my channel for more of this interesting video. Thank you for watching. Bye.